Alright, so which phone takes the most stable videos in one of the most challenging situations? Like I was literally running down the stairs and shooting a video with the telephoto lens here. Portrait video or cinematic mode, whatever they're naming it, we could be looking at some really advanced algorithms even for videos. Now, which phone delivers the most accurate and natural-looking bokeh effect, background blur effect? We'll also be looking into long-range zoom capabilities across all these phones, and everything else related to video recording. So in this video we'll be having the iPhone 17 Pro Max, which is pretty well known for class-leading video quality, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7. They should have got some Sony magic touch to it, considering they've been making alpha cameras since the early 2000s. The Samsung S25 Ultra, now let's face it, their latest and greatest in 2026 should be just around the corner, rumored to be launched in February, so we'll see. Now the Vivo, Honor and Oppo, they've been doing really great for photography these years, while software and video recording have been considered a little bit behind the competition for the past few years. Now we'll be comparing them and testing them out, especially their reliability for video recording today. Right, so this video is all about video recording, and this is how it sounds like and look like before uploading it to any sort of social media platform and dealing with all those compression. Well, here we have the built-in microphone here on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7 with a length of roughly about an arm's length. Right, here on the iPhone 17 Pro Max we do have portrait video cinematic mode here on the iPhone, and that's up to 4K video recording as well. And this is how it sounds like on the iPhone. And we have portrait video mode available on all the devices we've tested today, including the S25 Ultra here and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7. And this is how it sounds like here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro with the front-facing camera and the built-in microphone here. And it actually allows us to zoom all the way up to 2 times for the front-facing camera as well. I doubt if you'll be able to hear what I'm saying right now. Oh, I might just have to correct what I've just said here. The Honor Magic 8 Pro doesn't support portrait video recording for the front-facing selfie camera here, but it does record videos up to 4K. Hey everyone, Ray here. So that was the front-facing camera and audio quality from each of them. While here on the Sony, they've actually got a few features that could be considered as honorable mentions. They're actually the first company which has given their phone an actual zoomable lens. From 3.5x all the way to 7.1x, and anything in between would be optical zoom, just like on your DSLR or mirrorless camera with a zoom lens. Of course, we're dealing with a 12 megapixels sensor with a smaller sensor size here. So a sensor upgrade this year together with their level of technology when it comes to the lens itself, that could be really great. And here, when it comes to 4K 120 slow motion recording, we have support for the main camera ultra wide angle lens and the telephoto lens here on the Sony 1 Mark 7. It's also the only one here out of the 6 phones that's able to do this. So no matter which lens you're using, you'll be having the ability to freeze time, well, not freeze, but slow the time down up to 4 times at 4K resolution. In the meantime, you have 4K 120 support for the main camera and the ultra-wide lens on the Samsung, the main camera only on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, while the Oppo, Vivo and Honor are the exact opposite to the Samsung. They've got 4K 120 for the main camera and the telephoto camera here. Auto framing is another exclusive feature here on the Sony. If I'm not wrong, Samsung's actually the one who pioneered it. So here on the Sony, it's not only auto tracking the subject and auto framing it, it's actually transforming a horizontal video into a vertical one with all those tracking and auto framing effect. And speaking of Samsung, the Sony and the Samsung are actually the only 2 models here that support auto framing. On the contrary, if you're more onto the prosumer level, which I assume you could be as you're searching for this video on YouTube, here I must point out that Honor's opting for Rec 601 in terms of the color gamut for SDR video recording, which is quite rare these days, as we have Rec 709 as the mainstream right now. So I wouldn't say that's a huge issue here on the Honor, as if you're recording in HDR, they do have Rec 2020 HLG format support here. Now that would actually preserve a much wider room for post-editing, and I do see there's a huge lift in terms of video quality. Considering all that, we'll be enabling HDR video on every phone we have today. And of course, if we're more onto the pro level of workflow, lock is now considered a regular must-have feature thanks to the iPhone. Though in this video we'll be sticking with ProRes HDR, which is using the Dolby Vision format. Same here on the Vivo X300 Pro and the Oppo Find X9 Pro. We have Dolby Vision support on both of them. And here on the Sony, they've actually implemented S-Cinetone for mobile. That should give us a very similar look and feel in terms of color tones as on their larger mirrorless cameras. So right, we'll be sticking with the Rec 2020 HLG color gamut here on the Samsung, the Sony and the Honor. Without further ado, moment of truth for their video quality. Right, the upcoming test is about Tele-macro videography. We don't officially have Tele-macro support here on the S25 Ultra, the 5x telephoto camera, so we do have a minimum focus distance of approximately 20 cm across the Oppo, Vivo, Honor and Samsung when we are shooting on their telephoto cameras. Well, we can actually get subjects into focus as close as 4 cm here on the Sony. And sorry Apple, the minimum focus distance here on the telephoto lens is actually all the way up to 1 meter. So no Tele-macro videography here. Well, you might be able to create that look and feel here using the main camera, using digital zoom, so the depth of field here is not as shallow as that on the Vivo and the Honor. Using the 85mm lens here on a massive, at least on a phone scale, 200 megapixels 1/1.4-inch sensor, followed by the Oppo with a 1/1.56-inch sensor here. Now look, the Samsung and the Sony is actually doing pretty well in this comparison as well. So if we compare that to the Vivo, you'll definitely see the difference. So for this round, I'll have to give the crown to the Vivo and the Honor with a larger sensor and an 85mm lens. So that was all about optical quality, while this generation of flagships might actually give you some surprise when it comes to bokeh effect, portrait mode, cinematic mode for videos. Now this sort of background blur, shallow depth of field effect has been, in my opinion, what separated smartphone videography from actual videography with a proper camera, possibly with a full-frame sensor. Now look, even on the main camera, and I was actually standing quite far away from the phone. And of course, as we're talking about video recording, there's no point for me to stand still there. Now we're playing back the video 1/10 of the original speed, so we may take a really close look at how accurate they render the background blur effect and separating the main subject from the rest of the frame. Up to this point, the Vivo, Apple and Samsung are actually doing equally well, and the Sony is doing alright. But if we compare that to the rest of the competition, the edges of the main subject could look a little bit softer here, as we're talking about almost perfect edge detection here across the Oppo, Vivo, Apple and Honor. The Samsung as well on the main camera. I'm really glad to report that they're able to detect a strand of my hair, not only when I'm looking straight into the camera like when you're doing a Zoom call, but also when I'm turning around and doing all sorts of movements running up and down the stairs. So the main difference here could be skin tone rendering and color reproduction, and we have 4K resolution here on the Samsung, Apple, Vivo, Oppo and Honor, while that's 1080p Full HD on the Sony. I must say it's not something that you could be using every day, so we're searching for the best of the best in this comparison. And now is the skin tone. Here on the Samsung, we're looking at a cooler white balance with almost a reddish tint to it, and we're also looking at a lighter, flatter and less saturated profile here. On the contrary, we're having the familiar warmer tones here on the Apple, brighter highlights and richer contrast here on the Vivo. And I personally do think the colors here on the Sony is actually the most natural and is like coming out of a camera. So the Vivo and the Samsung's actually leading the race when it comes to edge detection. Again, it's like each strand of my hair and the glasses are all separated from the background really accurately here. The iPhone's also almost perfect here, only if it didn't miss the frame of my glasses where it's transitioning to the leaves on the background. Right, so here we have the Oppo and the Honor as well, and this time I was actually moving further away from the phone. It should be putting some real challenge to them. Now, if I'm not wrong, portrait mode for still photos was first introduced like 10 years ago on the iPhone 7, and now every phone on Earth's got this feature and they're doing a really great job. And I was totally shocked that this level of accuracy when it comes to edge detection and creating a natural looking bokeh effect, background blur effect is happening right here for video. And we're having a warmer, saturated look here on the Honor, and a cooler, less saturated, flatter tone here on the Oppo. And now is what's separating a great device from an excellent one for portrait videos. Here on the Sony, we have bokeh mode for both the main and the telephoto camera. Here on the Vivo, you're having portrait video for both the main and the telephoto camera, and that's in 4K. Same here on the Honor Measure 8 Pro, and you'll be triggering that simply by pressing the small icon here in the regular video mode. And you'll also be having a small little f aperture icon here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro. Pressing that will get you into the bokeh mode as well. Last but not least, here on the iPhone and the Samsung, we don't actually have support for the telephoto camera when it comes to portrait mode, cinematic mode, so the 3x software digital zoom's always there, got you covered. And now we're comparing portrait video shot on here, the Sony and the Vivo using their telephoto camera, to those shot on the Apple and the Samsung using the main camera with 3x digital zoom. So as we're standing way further away from the phone when we're talking about 3x zoom, it will be really challenging for them to accurately separate the main subject from the background using just the main camera, while here on the Sony and the Vivo they're delivering really accurate edge detection and natural-looking bokeh effect. Now don't get me wrong, the Samsung and the iPhone is doing alright here, though if we compare that directly to the Vivo, Oppo and Honor, they're definitely delivering really convincing results when it comes to portrait video recording. Those are like coming out of a professional camera. At least we're getting close to that. Right, so the second half of the video would be more about scenery and landscape videography and less about portrait. And right now we'll be comparing their video stabilization capabilities. Using here on the iPhone, that's a 2.8K spot mode. Again, different brands got a slightly different name for their stabilization mode. Like here on the Sony, it's called AI camera work. Now here on the Oppo, they've actually put something new onto the table. Their stabilization mode actually allows us to record videos all the way up to 4K. We have a similar ultra stabilization mode that's recording video in 2.8K here on the Vivo X300 Pro. Similar here on the Honor Measure 8 Pro in 2.8K as well. Now it's worth noticing that here on the Oppo, Vivo and Honor as well as the iPhone, you'll actually be able to use the stabilization mode with the telephoto lens here. While here on the Samsung and the Sony, you'll only be able to do that with the main and the ultra-wide lens. So moment of truth, which phone should you bring to your next skiing or wake surfing trip? Now just remember not to drop your phone into the water. Right, so if we compare only video stabilization, ignoring all those color science and dynamic range, which we will be coming back to those in a minute, believe me, we're actually looking at really similar performance here when it comes to video stabilization on the main camera. Across here, the Apple, Samsung, Vivo and Oppo. Now swapping places for the Sony and the Honor, they're doing a really great job here as well. Thumbs up for all the companies here. So if we really have to pick one absolute best when it comes to main camera video stabilization, I would say the Apple and the Samsung's marginally better than the rest of our competition here. And if I really have to nitpick it, the Honor tends to have a slight delay when it comes to keeping the main subject in the center of the frame when I'm trying to keep track on the main subject while running all around the place. So allow me to put it this way, main camera stabilization might not be what pushes them to the limit. The telephoto camera is, especially if you're trying to keep track on a subject, obviously moving up and down the stairs this time around, holding your device with just one hand and shooting with a lens with a longer focal length. You'll see the video appears to be more stable in real time on the viewfinder here on the Vivo X300 Pro and the Honor Measure 8 Pro. On the contrary, here on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, everything appears to be much shakier. It's almost like it's going to be an unusable video. Though once it's exported, all those magic behind the scenes will turn it into a really stable video. Now, who's the best of the best? We have really advanced software on the iPhone and arguably superior hardware on the Vivo and the Honor. The video stabilization king is, when it comes to the telephoto camera, the Vivo X200 Pro took the crown this time around. Now the Oppo is actually recording in 4K, so that's not totally a fair comparison, so you'll be ending up with a sharper video but less stable when it's compared to the Vivo. While the Sony and the Samsung's doing great here using the main camera zooming in digitally, of course you'll be losing some sharpness and details here. Now the Honor's actually doing a great job here as well, not as perfect as that on the Vivo, though it's almost on a par with the iPhone, which is widely regarded as one of the best on the market. Alright, now which phone should you bring to your next concert or wildlife photography trip? So previously in our camera comparison video which compared long-range zoom photography across 8 different phones, it's true that you could be looking at different level of AI enhancement across different phones when it comes to still photos imaging. Here for video recording, we can confirm none of them's got AI enhancement here. Of course, we'll be still dealing with different level of sharpening effect and noise reduction effect. In this case, we're actually looking at really similar level of sharpness and details across the Vivo and the iPhone at 20x zoom, while Samsung's a really close runner-up here. And now, if we take a close look at the transition between lenses across all these phones, and first, I'll be really happy if Sony is able to deliver slightly better software optimization on their 2026 flagship, alongside with a sensor upgrade for their telephoto camera that would easily make it one of the best camera systems on the market. And now when it comes to transitioning one lens from another, the Vivo X300 Pro is now on a par with the iPhone 17 Pro Max, which is widely considered as the absolute best on the market. Now the S25 Ultra is slightly behind in this race, though considering it has got 4 camera lenses compared to 3, and we'll be testing out the next generation in a matter of days, so we'll see. And now quality check time for the Oppo and the Honor. And first, for video recording, we have 15x as the maximum zoom range here on the Honor, and 18x here on the Oppo, 24x here on the iPhone, and 20x here on the Vivo, though it can actually go all the way up to 30 times with its stage mode. Now, just to make sure we're having a better look at the level of details they're able to capture, we'll be cropping the field of view on the Oppo and the Honor to 20x so that the main subject here will take up approximately the same area of the screen. So the Oppo, Honor and Samsung are actually capturing roughly about the same level of details when it comes to ultra long range zoom. We have the iPhone delivering a slightly sharper video, though under broad daylight the Vivo's got a similar level of sharpness here, with its video stabilization and noise reduction even better than that on the iPhone. Thumbs up, Vivo. Alright, now just to make sure we won't be making a mistake here, we'll be having another set of comparison. So this time around we'll be filming something that's actually moving. In this case, I'll be doing my best to keep the framing as close as each other as possible. At 20x we're still getting really similar results here across the Galaxy, iPhone and the Vivo. So the video here on the iPhone and the Vivo are marginally sharper than that on the Samsung, and the Vivo is doing a slightly better job in handling the noise and video stabilization, resulting again a slightly sharper video compared to the iPhone under broad daylight. Now swapping places for the Oppo and the Honor. Now look, despite the Honor's got a lens with a longer focal length at 85mm and a slightly larger sensor at 1/1.4 inch compared to the 70mm lens and the 1/1.56 inch sensor on the Oppo, with enough light, they're actually delivering really similar video quality. Again, in terms of ultra long range zoom, they are performing nearly identical to the Galaxy S25 Ultra. So the Vivo is indeed the ultra long range zoom king at the moment. Not by a huge margin though, so you might be considering AI features, battery life, low light photography and portrait photography, and possibly even more when deciding which phone's the best overall. And speaking of low light, which phone's doing the best in low light videos at their maximum zoom range in particular? Right here we have a scene with high contrast with an almost pitch black background, and I'll be trying to capture the small detail all the way on the bridge, and that's actually a highway sign. Now the Vivo is obviously doing a better job in reducing the noise, and we do have a sharper video here in general compared to the iPhone and the Galaxy. Now the Galaxy is doing slightly better than the iPhone when it comes to noise suppression. Right, it's turn for the Oppo and the Honor. In terms of the amount of details they're able to capture, we're actually looking at a very similar level across the Oppo, iPhone and the Galaxy. Now the larger sensor here on the Vivo and the Honor truly pays off. They are doing slightly better than the competition when it comes to extreme low light at their maximum zoom levels. You're right, that could be a little bit too extreme that you might not be doing that every day. Now back to a reasonable city landscape situation. At 20x, we're still getting a slightly sharper video here out of the Vivo and the Honor thanks to the larger sensor on the telephoto lens. Is it a huge difference compared to the iPhone and the Oppo? No, though are you going to notice the difference, especially if we're talking about noise control and the sharpness of the video in general? Yes. So most of the time when it comes to low light videos with reasonable lighting, we should be looking at similar performance across the iPhone, the Galaxy and the Oppo, while the Oppo and the Galaxy is doing a slightly better job reducing the noise and stabilizing the video in general. And at the top of the list, again, the Vivo and the Honor this time around delivered a slightly sharper video with less noise, but at the end of the day they are all doing pretty good at 20x equivalent zoom. Right, the last round of today's test will be going back to the basic, which phone's delivering the most realistic and accurate color reproduction, also possibly the widest dynamic range, preserving the most amount of details from the highlight and bringing out the most from the shadows. So what we're looking at here is basically the original colors, simply converted to Rec 709 from the original Rec 2020 color gamut without doing any sort of color grading and color correction. We do have a well-balanced video here on the Vivo and the iPhone. The shadows look a little bit brighter here, while the colors here on the iPhone is definitely looking realistic and untouched without a doubt. On the contrary, the Galaxy is giving more saturated videos by default, so the Samsung and the Vivo are doing better in terms of HDR, while here on the Sony, colors are actually true to life and vibrant. It is indeed closer to what we could be getting on a professional camera in this particular scene, especially if we dig a little bit deeper into color correction and light balancing. We do see there's a wider room for post-editing with the videos taken with the Sony with the HLG BT2020 color gamut, so just by lifting up the shadows a little bit without altering the colors too much. Now we are getting well-balanced videos out of all four phones here, though we are looking at a cooler white balance here on the Galaxy, true to life and natural colors here on the iPhone, brighter colors and slightly sharpened video here on the Vivo, and vivid yet true to life colors here on the Sony. However, if we're talking only about HDR power, it is indeed stronger here on the Galaxy and the Vivo. Just look, they are able to bring back the orange sunset color here. Now, on the other side of the story, if we're comparing the Vivo to the Honor and the Oppo as well as the iPhone here, we could be actually expecting much closer color reproduction across these four phones. Don't get me wrong, there are indeed some variants when it comes to how they render the colors, though even I myself wouldn't be able to remember how it actually looked like. So if I ask you to pick one video that looks the most pleasing to the eyes, which one would be your choice? That's a genuine question. Well, here, if we tilt the cameras slightly more towards the shadows area, now the Honor, Vivo, Oppo and Samsung are actually the four phones with more effective light balancing by default. Right, so we've spent almost 20 minutes trying to persuade you how great the camera on the Vivo has been, but that's totally not on purpose. Now, the ultra-wide-angle lens here on the Vivo X300 Pro, that could actually be one of the weakest points here on the Vivo. We do see slightly washed out colors and more noise here on the Vivo. Now, we do have a 1/1.56-inch sensor for the ultra-wide-angle lens here on the Sony. It's an interesting choice done by Sony here. They are actually prioritizing the ultra-wide-angle lens over the telephoto lens. And here's how it looks like on the native focal length on the telephoto lens here on the Sony, Vivo, iPhone and the Galaxy. We are getting a slightly sharper video here out of the Vivo, though in terms of color reproduction the iPhone's doing a decent job here. And here on the Honor Measure 8 Pro, we are facing a similar situation here when it comes to the ultra-wide lens. It seems like the two phones with the strongest tele lens, we are ending up getting a slightly dialed back ultra-wide lens. Will that be a deal breaker for you? Comment below. Well, here, going back to the tele lens, now the larger sensor size here on the Vivo and the Honor is not only bringing clearer videos with less noise, but also videos with higher contrast between the highlight and the shadows. While here on the Oppo, we do see there's a slight boost in color saturation when it comes to green colors. Right, the last round of today's test will be further pushing them to the limit in terms of skin tones rendering. Now we have an almost pitch black background, while at the same time we'll be able to compare if they're able to expose the highlight area on the background correctly. Right, so every one of them's doing a pretty great job this time around when it comes to balancing the light. It's worth noticing here, however, in terms of the skin tone, it appears to be slightly on the greenish side here on the Vivo. It could be the color science built into it, but also it could be the light bouncing off from the knitwear. A warmer tone here on the iPhone, a cooler white balance yet with a reddish tint here on the Samsung, and it's actually pretty well balanced here on the Sony. Now here comes to the surprise, we're actually getting a pleasing looking video here out of the Honor. The skin tone here is on point and the video's bright. Now the Oppo's suffering from the same issue here, similar to the Vivo. We are getting a slightly greenish skin tone when the flash is on. Again, it could be my knitwear bouncing off the light, so we are having a fair comparison here. All in all, which phone do you think is the best for video recording in 2026? Now we are dealing with different update cycles from different brands. And you're right, it isn't only about camera when it comes to our smartphone, let alone video recording. With that said, we do have a playlist of comparison videos covering battery life test. For that particular video, we spent 2 days doing the test across 8 different phones. AI features and more. If you're interested in those, we've got you covered. Don't forget to subscribe and see you next time.